Well, I have to go back next week to be part of a jury committee. So I'll keep you updated on that. And yeah, it is what it is. In any case, I am wearing a fun shirt today. This is Fuller from Home Alone. Kevin's cousin, I think, in the movie, but not weirdly little known fact. The part of Kevin's cousin Fuller was actually played by his younger brother. And this is one of my favorite scenes where somebody actually backs him into the wall with a chair and he's stuck, like pinned against the wall. When I was a kid, I thought that was the funniest thing I had ever seen in my entire life. Now, for today, we're going to continue this conversation about our community research projects. And again, we're going to do this really, really slow. Just kind of sort of, walk into it with some, we have time, right? We have time to kind of just sort of like enjoy the sights and the scenery before we really start putting all this writing together. Now, I actually had this discussion with the class yesterday, and for me, it's one that I find very enlightening. One of the most challenging things about writing about your community is looking at your community. And let's all just kind of face it. We tend to take our surroundings for granted, right? You're going to hear a lot of ideas that are kind of repeated from what we were doing with the eco narrative, but honestly, this is going to go in a very different direction. But in any case, a lot of times we take our environment for granted. We don't stop and actually look at it. Now, one of the things I asked yesterday was, we had a discussion, and I'm kind of glad you guys are a little behind the face-to-face class now, as opposed to ahead of them. Also, please pardon me if I'm stuttering a bit today. My sinuses feel like my eyeballs are going to be pushed out of my skull. So I don't feel particularly wonderful right now. But the thing is, I started talking to the class about the areas of the community that need attention. And we talked about a lot of different things, but the thing that always stood out to me, and something that I've had this conversation with classes many, many times in the past, is our mall. Now, the funny thing about this is a lot of professors, a lot of teachers will dismiss this as kind of like, it's a mall, who cares? But in actuality, malls are very significant centerpieces of a community, or at least they used to be. So as I'm talking here, keep in mind, and this is kind of one of those weird things that you can do a great deal of research on, that most people don't realize. People look at a mall and they see it at face value. Mall's a place you go buy stuff, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, what is happening with malls across America is kind of fascinating if you stop and look at it. So here's basically where this conversation went and why it's an interesting one. When we start talking about ways to improve our communities, inevitably the mall comes up. And I don't want to shovel a lot of criticism towards the mall in my particular city, because ultimately I think that this is not particular to the Brunswick area. Malls all over America are dying. And they are dying in very profound ways, in kind of depressing ways. And so people see this, and we stop and we wonder for a minute, what happened here, right? Because people's first reaction to this is, well, why can't we just have a better mall, right? Why can't we just do something about it? There's actually a lot of reasons that we can't. One, the advent of online shopping has made the location of the mall a little bit what we would call almost like anachronistic. It's out of time. It doesn't belong here anymore. Mainly because most of the shopping that we do, everything that you could possibly want, is available when you want it. You have access to it. It's delivered to your door. The idea of a physical space to go shopping is something that is very much on the decline, right? Except for outdoor outlet malls, which I don't understand, and I might need to ask about that. But let's focus on the indoor mall for a minute. When I was a kid, when I was in high school, the mall was a location that was not just a place to go and buy stuff, right? It was a place to congregate. It was a true community center. Even though I lived kind of in a rural area outside of Savannah, when I would hop in my car on a Friday night and just go to the mall, I was guaranteed to see a few people from my high school there. That's how much of kind of like a centerpiece these places were. And I was explaining this to my students the other day, and it's kind of strange to think about now, and it kind of reminds me just how old I am. But there used to be actual physical stores in a shopping mall that sold music, right? One of my favorite stores in the mall at that point was Blockbuster Music. And I love Blockbuster Music because you would go in there, you had a lot of band paraphernalia, you had shirts, you had all sorts of stuff that, like just merchandise related to the bands. But then you also just had the piles and the piles of physical media which held music, whether it be Shutter, cassette tapes, or compact discs. And very rarely back then you'd also have things like vinyl, though it wasn't as big a thing as its resurgence is bringing it back now. But I would go to these music stores and I would be perfectly willing to pay like $20 for a CD, right? For a band. Like at the time, I think I paid I feel like I paid $25 for an album by Green Day or Slipknot or something like that, which is just, absolutely insane to think about today. But what's really interesting about this conversation, even back then, I could hop in my car and go a few blocks down the road and go to Walmart and essentially get the same album for $12. There was a huge price increase that was always very obvious if you were buying something from a mall, right? Even though it was the exact same product. So why would we go the extra mile to go to a shopping mall to pay more for something, right? Why would we do that? We did that because the mall offered us something other than the products we were buying. It was the experience of going to the place, a very large commercial center where you had a lot of stuff being offered to you from a lot of different directions, a lot of specialty stuff that you might not necessarily be able to get at Walmart, but you were willing to pay higher prices for things because you were buying it from the mall. You also had things like, you had the food court, sometimes there were attractions and stuff. The point I'm trying to make here is we all had an understanding that when you went to the mall, you were getting something more than the product you were buying. You were getting the experience of going to the place. Now, as our economy has fundamentally changed, malls just can't seem to cope. And you're seeing just massive die-offs of malls as community centers. And again, I don't want to throw a whole bunch of tar at any one, place or establishment, but the string of store failures that you see has a tendency to like snowball. One store fails, and then a whole bunch of them start going belly up afterward. When you go to a place like a mall and you see closed storefronts, that makes the environment depressing. It's no longer exciting to be there, right? It's sad because you see all these failed businesses and like whole wings of an institution just being shut up because there's nothing out there. It actually makes people not want to go to the location. So in any case, my students asked, or they were basically indicating, well, the problem with our community is the problem that we see with our mall. And I countered with the fact that might not necessarily be a community problem. That might be a national, global economic issue because these institutions have essentially been left behind. Now, why? And I think this is going to be the most difficult part of this lecture. A, because it's a hard question to ask, and B, because my head feels like it's about to explode. Why is this important? Well, we're talking about issues within our communities and we're talking about potential solutions, right? We're doing research. Think about what I have brought to this discussion just about the mall. I've brought my personal experience. I've brought some knowledge that I've built up over the years because I read about the economy. I'm interested in things like news and in economic stuff. That's something that actually kind of fascinates me a little bit. So when a few years ago, when I went to one of the malls in Savannah, I won't say which one, I noticed something very interesting going on is you had these storefront failures. At first, a school moved in to that mall and began basically using the space as classroom space, which was absolutely insane to me at the time. But why not? It's an empty space. And the other thing is, you started to see the replacement of typical retail shops. There was a whole bunch of antique stores that were opening up in these places. And I was like, why is the mall filled with antique stores? Well, think about it for a minute. Apparently, running an antique store is actually kind of, you don't actually have to put a lot into that, right? Because you're just kind of putting product out there. You don't have a whole bunch of, it's just not as difficult to run something like an antique store as it is to run a kind of corporate franchise, right? When you have to have constant sales and overhead. So the thing is, these spaces are changing. Bulldozing a mall, I think, is going to be an incredibly bad idea. And we have to think about, like, if we've got these giant buildings that are just empty, what do we do with them, right? So in some ways, the economy itself will deal with these massive spaces, but in other ways, they could become decrepit. They could become condemned and dangerous places. So we actually do have a substantial problem growing that's becoming more and more of an issue staring us right in the face. Empty buildings are a damage, are basically like a money suck for everything around them, right? If you have a restaurant or you have a store in proximity to the mall, the failure of that mall is absolutely deadly for what you're running. Now, again, I'm trying to tie this together. David is not doing well. I'm hurting so bad. But the point I'm trying to make here is this conversation was fascinating because one of the big points I've tried to make over and over throughout this semester is that there are things beyond the surface. We tend to look just at the surface level of the things that we interact with, the things in our lives, and we don't pick at the thing. I know it's a really gross image, but we don't peel back those layers to see what's going on behind it. Most people say, our mall sucks, right? But why? What's happening there? Is it just something going on in our community? So, in any case, I've laid out for you one of those conversations that we've had, and we've discussed it in pretty good long details. Here's what I want to do today. I want you guys to go to our community research forum, which I will create. I know I've been really bad about saying I would do stuff and not doing it. It's been, man, I know I say this all the time, but you guys ever just kind of feel like life is just punching you in the face over and over and over again? I definitely feel like that today. So in any case, I'm going to create the community research forum. And I want you guys to start coming up with your own observations. And I want you to think about it in three ways. What is good about this community? What is not working about this community? And what can we do to make things better and all that, right? 3 things. Let's make this post, let's be ambitious. Try to go for 8 sentences. We're just starting a conversation right now. We're not doing any research yet. We're just discussing the community that we live in. And we're making observations and we're talking about, what's good, what's bad, what can we do to improve, right? So in any case, you guys, hope you're having a great day. And I'm going to take more pain meds and hopefully I'll eventually be able to get, my eye is twitching. So much pressure right here. And it's like, ah! In any case, thank you guys for listening. And I look forward to getting more into this assignment as we move forward. Thank you. Ugh.